I'm Mr. Bolton too. I'm the band director, and just met Mr. Womack. He's the assistant band director, and we're here today with our high brass sections. There's some guys in here who are beginner band guys. There's guys in here who are more advanced. We have trumpets and French horn players here today, and Cecilia. And I want to make sure how do we say your last name correctly? Is it
It's
Buettgen?
Cecilla Buettgen.
Okay, Buettgen. All right.
Yeah.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, like Biken. Yeah.
Biken, Buettgen. Great. Well, everybody, Cecilia is the French horn player with the President's Own Marine Corps Band. She's here to have a virtual clinic with us today. And we're really pleased to have her. Let's give her a little round of applause online. Yay.
All right.
About like in the band, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I came to be a professional brass player, and throughout a little bit of opportunity to ask some questions, to unmute yourself and ask some questions of me, because I think that's the most fun part about it. So first and foremost, the President's Own Marine Band, just in case you guys don't know about this, our primary mission is to make music for the President of the United States and the White House. And so we are the oldest continuously active musical organization in the United States. Similar to your school, I believe you are the oldest school in the nation. And,
oldest high school.
Oldest high school. And,
oldest high school band, yeah.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And so, ever since the very first presidents, we've been making music for them. Thomas Jefferson was the first president who called us the President's Own United States Marine Band. He kind of gave us that little nickname, and having us. He himself was an amateur violin player. Does your band have a marching band?
We have a group. It's a reenactment group. We wear Civil War outfits, and we do parades, but we don't do field shows per se like at football games. We do more of a pep band at football games. But we get called on by the city of Memphis to do lots of civic things as well, military style band things. Yeah, so we've been in Veterans Day parade for the last, we haven't missed a Veterans Day parade since 1999. So we've been doing military stuff. We're very familiar with that sort of playing.
Okay, so I won't say any more because I think that you guys get the idea. That's almost exactly what we do. We don't do like field drills here, although I did actual like what you would consider your normal marching band in high school, where we did do field drills. So that was a good background for me coming into this job to at least have some marching skill. What you do is more close to what we actually do every day on these funerals. In addition to the funerals, we give hundreds of concerts per year. We have our regular concert band can be anywhere from 65 to 85 members. It depends on the piece of music that we're playing and the concert that we're giving. But we do big band, full band concerts. We also have a jazz band, like I said, the chamber orchestra, and then we also do chamber concerts. So you can imagine if you have friends of yours in your own school, I'm sure, and I hope that many of you have played duets and trios and quartets and quintets. And that's what we can do. We can sign up any piece that we want and then get to play it for an audience, which is really fun parts of my job. So I'm going to just stop for 1 second here, and I'd like to open it up if any of the students want to unmute and ask me any questions that might have popped in their mind as I've been talking so far.
Sure. Any guys, any questions? Blake, do you have your hand up? I think you have your hand up. Go ahead, Blake.
So you mentioned that kind of when you're in this band, you mentioned you started when it was President Obama, and you're still here, President Trump, and you'll be here for the next president. How long does someone stay in this band? Like, what's the cycling out and cycling in like?
Great question. So, in fact, I will segue into the audition process when I'm done answering your question, because it has a little bit to do with that. But the quick answer is that we are allowed to stay for a maximum of 30 years. So I got in 2013, and that means I'm not very good at it. 2043, I think, is when I is when I would have to leave. I can only do 30 years. That being said, when I first won the audition, I enlisted for 4 years because I am a Marine. I'm an active duty Marine. I still follow the same process as every other Marine in terms of going to MEPS, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It's like a physical, and then I sign all my active duty paperwork. And my initial enlistment was for 4 years. After your first enlistment, and any other enlistment throughout your career, the band directors and your section leader and your principal all get together and they all talk about you. And so for me, they got together and they said, is she good? Is she good for a good fit? Is she a strong musical player? Is she keeping up her chops? Is she on time? Is she wearing the right uniform, which is harder than it sounds sometimes? You know, I'm sure someone's forgotten the wrong colored socks now and then.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Socks are a big deal for us.
They're a big deal for us too, believe it or not. So, you know, it's just that kind of stuff, and sort of similar to any report cards that you guys might get. You know, your conduct, of course, and the effort you put in, all that great stuff. So they liked me, and I re-enlisted for 6 years. I actually asked them what's the longest possible time I can re-enlist for, because if they would have said 20 years, I would have said okay and just sold my soul. I really love my job. It's really fun. It's really unique and very fulfilling. So, but they only let me do 6 years. So it's a very long answer to your question, but essentially 30 years is the max.
Yes. Could you talk to?
Let's take one more question before I continue on.
I have a question.
The audition.
Yeah. Well, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah.
Nick, what you have?
I think you said audition.
Yeah,
Okay.
We're breaking up a little bit. But yeah, do you have the little task bar that says conversation? We can ask questions through there if you can't hear us very well.
I'm afraid to touch anything.
It's in the little taskbar in the middle. You'll see it's like a little conversation thing.
Oh.
And it's chat, I think.
Yes. Okay.
If something happens and we get disconnected or whatnot, we can always chat through this little thing.
Oh.
Like if the connection starts going bad. But Nick,
Okay,
can you hear me, Nick?
Good.
Yes, sir.
Nick, what's your question?
Okay, so it's kind of a two-part question, but it's kind of short. But my question for you is, how do you feel about being a French horn player in an orchestra? Because, yeah, that's just a question in general. Like, just how do you feel? Does it feel out of place for you? Does it feel special? How does it feel to be kind of unique
like
around
in regards to the difference between being a band and an
orchestra?
orchestra?
Up a little bit at the very beginning. You said.
I'll type it.
Thank you. Difference in playing horn in the orchestra and the band. Great question. For me, the band is a lot bigger, and you're playing with all wind instruments. Obviously, there's no strings, except for possibly a double bass player. In the orchestra, it's a chamber orchestra, which is important to know, because in a full-size orchestra, there probably would be a little bit more similarity in terms of sound output. But in the chamber orchestra, I'm playing much more sensitively, much less. If I see a forte in a chamber orchestra piece, I'm probably only going to play what I would consider a mezzo forte, for example. It's important to see that, and I'm sure you've experienced in your own band. Playing in a smaller group, you don't have to play in the full band. One of the biggest difference between that and an orchestra proper is that the horn players play a lot more. The brass players in general play a lot more. And I don't know how many of you have experienced in an orchestra, but brass players don't play a whole lot. We add color. The horns play a little bit more, I think, than trumpet players in classical music, up until at least some of our more modern like Stravinsky and that kind of his ilk. But for us, we play offbeats in a march. It's constant. It's the whole piece. Or in this Holst piece, I have we just did a recording that you can look up on our Facebook page, where we did a like kind of an a cappella type thing with the Holst Suite in E flat, the first movement. I rested for the first like 20 bars or so, and then I played almost the entire rest of the piece. Maybe I had a little short break in the middle. So to answer your question, I think I just have to be much more careful about managing my endurance, my keeping an eye on, all right, make sure I'm not using too much pressure as a brass player. And because I'm sure some of you have experienced that. You can, it is thrilling to add that pressure and pop out those high notes, but you're only going to be able to do it for a very short amount of time. So it's much better. It's something I'm constantly aware of is, am I pushing too hard? Yeah, I need to use a little bit more air to compensate for the fact that in band literature, I play a lot more and a lot louder. Great question. If it's okay, I'd really like to move on and talk a little bit about our audition process.
Sure.
Great. In the President's Zone Marine Band, what we do is we send out a little ad through Facebook or the International Musician, which is a musician's newspaper, and other social media avenues. And we let everyone know, hey, we have an opening for trumpet or trombone. And this happens when, you ask how long can we stay in the band? Well, you can stay for 30 years. Some people retire earlier, maybe after 23 years. Okay, so we'll pretend Joe Schmo retired after 23 years. We put out the ad in the International Musician, and we open our audition to anyone, literally anyone, as long as you are able to enlist in the Marine Corps. So if you are between the age of 18 and 34, and you don't have like a criminal record, which I'm pretty sure most of you don't, then you are eligible to take this audition. You don't have to have any prior experience in any other organization, which I frankly loved, because for professional musicians, when you go to audition for, let's just pretend the New York Philharmonic has an opening, and I send them my resume, and I think I'm a pretty good horn player. Well, they're going to come back, and they were telling me, at least at this time, they were saying, you don't have enough experience. All the orchestras say that. They don't hire you because you don't have experience. But how are you supposed to get experience if they don't hire you? This is conundrum. So the Marine said, doesn't matter if you don't have experience. What we're looking for are the most talented players and people who will love this job and do this job well. So they sent me a packet of music, and you can just nod your head. Do you all know what excerpts are?
I do. But...
In case you don't, yes. Okay. Okay, briefly, in case you don't, an excerpt is just usually between 30 and 90 seconds. It's typically a very challenging part of a piece, and that can be challenging technically or challenging musically. And they're checking your technique, they're checking pitch, air support, musicality, all those great things that your band director is constantly harping on you guys about in your rehearsals. And so in my first round, I played 6 of these excerpts, and there were 100 people at my office, and they advanced 12 to the next round. Out of those 12, they went down to 4 after we played some more excerpts. When there were 4 people left, we each played with the principal horn player of the Marine Band, Hillary Harding. She's incredible. And why would they do this? But it's so that they can see, can we match pitch, tone, tempo, style, all those great things, all the fundamentals. Because as soon as you can sound yourself, I know this from person, and you haven't practiced being in tune, it's going to be very obvious to the committee. So after we did that round, and after we did a little bit of sight reading, which I know sends shivers down everyone's spine, they went from 4 people to 2 people. And then after it was just Tim and I, they asked if the 2 of us would play one more time. By this time, I was feeling pretty tired. And then they said, surprise, we've got 2 spots open, which was so great because I was really nervous. And I will say as a note that the sight reading is important in our organization. You should be able to do it anyway, but it's important because we have for the White House, it's called a standby book. It's about this thick. It's just a big red folder filled with hundreds of pieces of music. Now, this folder, while it is available to us to practice from, we are not allowed to take it home. And that means that we can only practice it at work, or we have to make some practice copies. But we have to learn that music on our own. And that means, like, let's say I've got a big concert, but then the White House calls and says, hey, we want you to play this gig for this president that's coming to town. Great. Okay, well, I'm going to do what I can, but I don't know what pieces the conductor's going to pick necessarily. And there are even times when I talked about those staff arrangers. The president will say, you know what, like President Trump, I think he really likes musicals. And so he'll say to us, oh, I'd really love it if you can have this piece played next week. Our arrangers get busy, they write it out, and a lot of times they will just put that music on our stand, and we get a downbeat from the conductor, and that's it. There's no rehearsal for it. And we have to play as though we rehearsed these pieces. So I'm going to take 1 second and ask if anyone has any questions.
Any questions, guys? I was going to ask a couple. Oh, go ahead. Who's that?
Caleb.
Caleb, go ahead.
I had a question about, does being in the band kind of trump over any of your Marine duties? Like as a Marine, or do they go hand in hand?
Great question. Okay, so here's the next part about the audition process and the job itself. And I promise this will, as always, I have long answers, but they all work together. So our mission is to provide music for the President of the United States. And although we give concerts and we do these educational outreach programs like I'm doing for you right now, we only have what's called one military occupational specialty, or MOS. And that MOS is to provide music for the president. However, my brother he was he has two MOS. So his primary MOS was to be an infantry person, and his secondary MOS, I actually have no idea what it is, but it might have had to do with ordnance or driving trucks or whatever the Marine Corps was having him do. Okay. Secondly, the president's own Marine band does not go to boot camp. We are the only premier military band that does not do that. So the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Army, they all go to boot camp, all their premier bands, and that's great. I am happy enough that I didn't have to do that, but I'm still considered an active duty Marine. Because I don't have a secondary MOS, I will never be deployed. I never have to fight. It's kind of a waste of taxpayer money to send me to boot camp. And I would also say that what I really love about the Marine Corps is part of it is to consider that we want the top tier musicians for our president and to represent the United States of America. And if we break our fingers, well, guess who's not going to be playing music for the president? So there are a few considerations here, but that's the primary reason. So to answer your question, knowing all of that, my duties as a Marine are to do what I'm doing right now, which is to tell you healthy questions about brass playing, and to give concerts, and to support the White House and whatever. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes. Good question, Caleb.
Yeah, what else?
Any other questions, guys?
Do you have suggestions for our horn players on method books or etude books for them to work out of?
Sure. Can I just confirm, am I talking to all brass players or just horn players?
Trumpets and horns.
Trumpets and horns. Great. All right. Just reconfirming. Yeah, I have a few suggestions actually. One of my favorite etude books is by a man named Koprasch, Kopraschsch, I think. There are several of these books. They are I don't know what the word is. Like they get harder as you go. So the good news is, like, the very first one I think is quarter notes and half notes, and what he's having you focus on in the part of this is just these hairpin dynamics, and it teaches you air support, breath control, and keeps your and stick. It seems very easy on the surface, but when you work with a teacher, or it suddenly you're like, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. And then for the end of the book, there are these page-long etudes that are just running 16th notes, and it works on technique. What I can do is there's another book that I really like, Maxime Alphonse, and that really works with a lot of musical and style tech. So, for example, some of his etudes have, they'll work on just staccato, or they'll work on just carrot tops or accents. And what's the difference between all three of those? He gets really brutal pretty quickly because he'll have a staccato note and a carrot top all next to each other, and you, as the musician, make the difference known to the listener, right? And I think that these are things that you should pay attention to no matter what instrument you play, frankly. But like I said, I will give your director some of the high school students, and you guys can work on that for sure. Trumpet players, how many of you guys have heard of the Arbenz book?
A lot of them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I see some people nodding. Let me grab it. I'll show you. Even though it's specifically for trumpet players, I use it as a French horn player. Here's the book. You see how thick it is. This is my Arbenz, and he just has all sorts of little exercises that addresses airflow, articulation, breath support, like everything. It's just basically like a trumpet player's Bible. And even though it seems very intimidating, the good news is if you work with a teacher or even your band director, they can point you out a few of these. Like if you say, hey, Mr. Bolton, I'm really struggling with that, and you say, but I bought that book that the blonde lady was talking about. So he can point some out for you. I'm hearing you, Mr. Bolton, but you can help your students find some appropriate etudes. Great question.
Yes.
All right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just was gonna say, if you want, I can take a moment and just tell you a little bit about where I was in high school myself, just for any of your students who may be interested in a career in music. I know I'm kind of running out of time here, but briefly I'll say I started on flute in 5th grade, and I was really bad. And I switched to French horn, and I didn't take any lessons. But I had a really great band director who kind of set me up appropriately. For embouchure is slightly, and I don't know how many people know that, because many people switch from trumpet to French horn and they keep that trumpet embouchure. An appropriate embouchure, we call it 1/3 lower, 2/3 upper. And sorry, I know I'm kind of all over the place here, but I basically say the bottom rim of the mouthpiece, the bottom curve of your lip, and then the top 2/3 go over the top lip. Anyway, that was my setup from the beginning, and that was the right setup, and I got very lucky with my band director in that way. But the good news is a lot of students don't have that, and they make that change later, and that's okay. But there were things I did wrong, like articulation. I used to articulate with like the broad part of my tongue. And it was like the sounds. It was pretty bad. And I finally got a teacher in 11th grade, and he just heard me playing at solo and ensemble and said, "You sound really good. Would you consider taking lessons?" I said yes. And then after about 3 months, he said, "You could do this for a living if you wanted to be a band director, but I really think you have something special, And I said, "Oh, sure," because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I love music. Great. And by the end of 11th grade, I decided I wanted to be a professional musician, and I started working really hard, and I started practicing 2 to 3 hours a day. But I want to let you know that isn't something that just happened overnight. This was something that I started taking lessons, started practicing a little more, started getting involved in the band, and then over the next, over 2 years, I decided I want to be a professional. And I would like to encourage anyone who has questions about that, your band directors can give you my email address, and please feel free to email me any questions you have, because I know we only have a limited amount of time today to talk about all that. Any question? I want to open the rest of the time up for questions from the students.
I think we have a question on the chat, if you'd like to take a look at the chat, from Brendan O'Kane, who's a trumpet player. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, it's kind of cutting in and out, but you said you have a question from a trumpet player?
Yes, if you look at the chat room, it's right there.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Was this the question about the relationship between the Marines and the band?
Yes.
Oh, great question. Okay, I'm just reading this really quick. The relationship between us and the conductors, are you friends or are you coworkers? Okay, great question. So I am very lucky in the Marine band. We actually all get along pretty well. That is not necessarily the case. I mean, I'm not in the New York Philharmonic, for example. I don't really know, but I've heard some rumors that there's a little bit of infighting and drama there. For us, we base our program off of mutual respect and giving our fellow musicians the benefit of the doubt. And I think this is something that you all can apply in your own lives and something you can carry forward no matter what job you have in your life. It's one thing to say, Susie's out of tune every single day, and she's just dragging down the whole brass, the brass sections, and it's just the worst. Well, that's one way to go about it, and you're just going to cause a lot of infighting. It's another thing to be respectful and say, you know what, maybe Susie is struggling. What can I do to make this better? And what I would do in the Marine band and what we do as professionals is I would walk up to Susie and say, hey, Susie, I'm really having a hard time finding the pitch here. And I would just love to work with you to see if we can't solidify that a little bit. What's my purpose for doing that way? Because I'm basically saying, I'm not blaming Susie. I'm just saying, hey, I can't figure this out, which is true. I can't, and it might be her fault and it might not. And sometimes what you end up finding is that maybe it is your fault. And that's okay too. And that just means letting go of your ego and working to make the product, the musical product, the most important part of the process, instead of, she's not as good as I am. She might not be. Your friends and your students, like you guys might have people who are better, or maybe they're learning a new instrument or whatever their situation is. So just be respectful and kind, and that's what we do in the Marine band. As far as our relationship with the conductor, again, the Marine Corps, so respect is sort of built into the whole institution. But I do not call my director by his first name. I call him Sir. His name is Colonel Fettig, just like you would call your band directors Mr. Or Doctor, or however they prefer called. And so I am not what I would call friends with my director, but I do have a professional relationship with him, and I'm always courteous, and he is in return courteous to me and respects me for what I can do and bring to the band as well. Does that answer the question?
I think it answers it very well. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, but why don't we? I wouldn't mind hearing one question answered. Can you go through your practice regiment with us, maybe with the band or personally?
Sure, absolutely. The caveat is that my personal practice regimen has changed over the years, but what I think can apply for you and anyone is that you need to do every day the thing that is going to set you up for success. So let's make that our baseline. For me as a French horn player, and this is true for trumpet players as well, we do a lot of the heavy, loud lifting in the band, which means we can feel a little bit beat up. I'm sure you've all experienced that in your own program. So to counteract that, I try every day to start with very slow downward scales. I actually haven't practiced yet today, so this might be a little rough, but I'll give you a little idea. Then I might go up a half step. And then up a half step, and up a half step. All I'm doing, I'm just slurring, I'm getting my air moving, and I'm not starting in the highest, loudest part of my instrument, okay? It might be fun, but it's going to beat you up, and then the rest of band is going to be really hard for you. So start soft, start slow, and then work up from there. After I start with my soft, so I'm putting my horn down. After I start with my soft descending scales, then I move to arpeggios. All right, and then I go up a half step, and I do that some more. So now I'm starting to gradually work in flexibility and get that part of my embouchure moving. And then after that, I might do some articulation exercises, and then whatever you need for the day. But start slow, start soft, and build up from there. Even if you only have 3 minutes, like you just switched classes, you've run over from a school, you sit down, take the minutes of those 3 minutes and just play some soft, slow stuff, and then add in the other things. It's going to help protect your face in the long run. And then usually I practice a couple hours a day. So my second session is where I practice my band music, etudes, and my solos.
And how often?
Very condensed.
And how long does the band practice a day together?
So the band, we have a concert. We'll pretend that it's going to be next week. Okay, next week we have a concert. So the band will all get their music folders approximately 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and we are expected to practice the music on our own time, to listen to the recordings of that music on our own time, and then we will meet for 2.5 hours, 4 days a week. So we'll meet Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each rehearsal is 2.5 hours long, and during 2.5 hours, we have a 20-minute break. So really, just a little over 2 hours for 4 days. And then we'll give our 2-hour-long concert on Sunday. Yeah. So it's a lot. I'm sure a lot of you are going, oh my gosh, we only play like 5 pieces, and we rehearse for 3 months. So we do go through quite a bit of music, as you can imagine.
Well, thank you very much. Really
Yes,
appreciate
thank you.
It's been great. Would you mind playing?
You.
Maybe we could end with a little excerpt or something. Would you mind playing something for us?
Sure. Oh gosh.
Give these guys something to shoot for.
Let's see. Like I said, I haven't warmed up today. So, all right. I make mistakes too, okay, guys? That's from Mozart. Let's see.
Yay.
Something like that. Anyway, it's not very exciting.
Yay.
That's fun.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Awesome. Have a great one.
You too.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.